Hi everyone, this is Wednesday, the 5th of March 2025. This is the Cluster API Project's community meeting. First, before we start, we're following the code of conduct, which comes down to please be nice to each other. Feel free to use the raise hands feature if you have questions or other things to tell us. And yeah, so let's get started. First of all, we give time to new attendees who want to introduce themselves. So I'm gonna mute myself for a second, and if there's anyone wanting to introduce themselves, feel free to speak up. Waiting for a second, but doesn't look like lots of familiar names in the participant list. What I did forget to say is feel free to add yourselves to an attending list too. And with that, I think then we will continue with the open proposal readout. There's the in-place proposal, in-place updates proposal here, which is already around for some time. I don't know if there's something someone want to share. There's quite some progress happening there, as far as I know. And I think the relevant folks are not on the call, so I would say we can continue to the discussion topics. Yeah, if there's someone having a topic which is not yet on the agenda, feel free to add it so we get to it in time. And with that, I think Fabrizio, feel free to kick off the first part.
Thank you. So first, a PSA. So we have a code freeze the 18th of March. So basically in less than 10 working days, something similar. So it's time to start wrapping up work from 1.10. Stefan and me started to ping forks on some PR that we are aware are active and near completion. If you are working on some PR and would like to try to get into the release, please reach out.
Thank you. That's a good call. Feel free to get to the next one.
Okay, next one, also a quick one. So I finally took time to split up the agenda doc, and so now we have HTTPS cluster API 6 K8S IO, which are our book. If you add a slash agenda, you will be redirected to this doc. If you add a slash agenda slash 2025, you will be again directed to this doc. If you instead add 2024, you will be redirected to last year doc, and so on. So everything should be fine. Please let me know if someone finds some issue.
Thanks for the point. I see you already also migrated all the old notes we put for this year in the last year's doc to this doc. So if someone searches old entries from this year, they are all in here and not in the old doc. So where
Yeah,
they
and
are supposed to be.
if you scroll down, I also added a sentence. If you are searching for older doc, this is the link basically. And the same in the other docs, so they should speak each other.
Thank you for keeping this up to date.
Okie dokie. So next point. So I open a PR to make a few cleanups and improvement on the version page. So the first improvement is that before we had a little bit of version policies in contributing.doc and other in the version page. So now they are all together in one place. And second, basically, I tried to bring together and document a couple of convention or tribal knowledge that was not previously documented. And I also added the note about skip upgrade, which is a follow-up of last week's discussion about CRD deprecation and removal. So if you look at the new version, of the version page, we'll now find the description of skip upgrade, description of downgrades that we do not support, but now it is written somewhere. And then there is also an explanation. There is a better explanation about how do we correlate cluster API version, cluster API, the cluster API binary release and the cluster API version. How do we correlate cluster API release with the contract version? And version skew, stuff like that. So I try to clarify everything that came into my mind about version management. Please take a look. I think the only difference with the past should be that now we are more formal about supporting only N-3 skip upgrade, because basically we are building all the entire CRD API deprecation and removal story on top of this assumption.
It's a big one. Thank you. Other questions to it? Don't see any hands raised. Okay, then I think we can move to the next topic if you're okay. Okay, Jakob, you're free.
Yeah, hi. So I haven't done a lot of research into all of the available options yet, but it recently came up internally because we've been struggling with determining whether a node is in our clusters at least is actually ready or like healthy enough to be considered working, more or less. So we are in a bare metal environment, which is usually a little bit special, and in some cases we need, for example, for control planes, we need additional pods to run on a node for it to work properly. In our case, that's kubevip, which is a very small load balancer that we use to do load balancing for our control plane or for the API server. And if that's not running, the control plane node isn't really healthy from our point of view. And we're currently, I don't know what exactly we've done in that area so far. I think we just expected it to just work because it usually does. But we've had the problem that it sometimes just fails to come up. For example, I don't know, I think a few days ago, the container registry was down internally, so it got stuck. But Cluster API, of course, doesn't care and doesn't recognize it. And it just continues to roll out the control plane, which then effectively kills the cluster by at some point making the API unavailable. So we're now looking for some way to extend basically the readiness scope of machines to potentially, for example, include pods in our case, or maybe other things. I don't know what other people are doing. In our case, maybe it's also networking, which requires additional services, for example, to make that work properly. So the question is there anyone else that already does something like this, including additional things in the machine readiness status or the machine readiness? And if not, what do you think, like in general, about maybe adding something in that direction to Cluster API? One of our thoughts was, for example, expecting a specific set of pods to be ready on the node. So for example, some label selector and all of the pods that are returned by it need to be readiness, or their health check and readiness check needs to be green, something along those lines.
I think there's something in the pipeline. Stefan, go ahead first, maybe.
I think first maybe we have to differentiate between two sorts of like readiness or healthiness or whatever. One I would say is what goes into the machine ready condition or available or whatever that looks like now with beta 2. and that part is used during machine rollouts. And then potentially also what is happening through machine health checks. And you might care about one or both of those places, depends on what you're aiming for. And then just a few things that I know that either already exist or that have been floating around for a while that could help. But they're not the full solution for what you're looking for at the moment. So I'm mostly mentioning it because you said you weren't looking at the available options yet. So
Yes.
the one thing that we added with beta 2 conditions is essentially machine readiness gates, which allows you to say, hey, I have a bunch of additional conditions on my machine. And those should be also used when we calculate if ready should be true or false. Of course, you would need something that actually adds a condition on a machine based on what you ever care about. And then you can configure, okay, yeah, basically you have to implement something that sets the condition, and then you can configure, okay, copy should also care about this condition. This would cover the rollout case, or should, as far as I can tell. And the other thing for machine health check, I mean, on one side, I mean, what we have today is that we can only look at node conditions. What we have been thinking about for a while is that machine health checks can also look at machine conditions. So if you basically end up with something that surfaces whatever you care about as a condition on a machine, then on one side, we can already integrate it with machine readiness gates in that rollout piece. And if we slightly extend machine health checks, we can also make it part of machine health checking. Yeah, that's my current state. In general, on our side, I think we did not do anything yet in that direction, but I think we're slowly getting there. We're thinking more and more about if we should do something more than what we have today.
Maybe one prior art example where we already do something in that direction is, correct me if I'm wrong, Stefan and Fabrizio, like KCP adds conditions for etcd and kubeAPI server and so on the machine, and uses the machine readiness gates to track that status in control plane machines. Fabrizio, go ahead.
Yeah, just a note that while readiness gates were properly implemented in machine deployment, we just merged a PR. We recently merged a PR that implement them in KCP and also up to cluster class. If I remember well, you are not using cluster class yet, Jacob, but at least if you're looking at control plane and KCP, now in KCP there is the possibility to define readiness gate that Stefan was explaining before, and those readiness gates get propagated down to machines. As soon as they get propagated down to machine, the new V1 beta 2 condition, machine ready, will be computed considering your readiness gate. And starting from copy 111, this ready condition will also become what influence readiness for for progressing with the rollouts, etc., etc. So we are getting there.
Yes, sounds very good. Then I looked at the new conditions already, and we're actually already migrated to them in our internal operator, because they are more useful. But I either forgot about it or missed that part. So I look into it, and then we maybe can kind of come up with some solution around that feature, and then maybe, I don't know, provide some or build some small component that runs in addition that creates those conditions accordingly. If we do, we'll probably publish it.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the feedback. We put really a lot of effort, and hearing good feedback about new condition is really appreciated. I just want to bring it up. There are also a few issues coming up in our backlog about new conditions. One of them is sort of interesting. It is about finding a smart way to surface node conditions well-defined set of node condition up to the machine. So you can use stuff like the node problem detector, and then basically tell cluster API, please surface, I don't know, kernel panic. I don't remember the exact name of the condition up to the machine, and then include it in the readiness gate if I want to. Yeah, so definitely we're looking forward for feedback about conditions, readiness gates. 111 is when all these, the big picture about the new condition will become entirely will become complete.
All right, sounds good. Right.
Just one disclaimer that I'd like to add in that context. So I think it definitely makes sense that we have to be able to include some sort of additional information like that in the places where Copy makes the decisions. But Copy should not be the entire replacement for monitoring stack, of course. But of course, when Copy makes decisions, they have to be correct. But I think in addition to that, there will be always like ideally some additional monitoring stack for continuous monitoring to get like proper adoption of that. But yeah,
we're primarily concerned with rollout to not like. I think I'm just here as like the spokesperson. But I think the problem actually was that it destroyed or almost destroyed one of our clusters by rolling away working control plane nodes and replacing them with broken ones. So that's the main concern.
Yeah, we had a similar issue a while ago with a new Kubernetes version where basically KCP was rolling through the entire control plane, and we didn't even notice that during the upgrade nothing was working, and only afterwards it started working again. Yeah, so I'm familiar with that sort of problem.
In that case, the issue was kubeproxy, and this should be also tracked in our backlog.
Yeah, I think I don't remember exactly if it was kubeproxy or kubelet. It might have been the kubelet cannot start pods on control plane machines until everything was in Kubernetes 131 or something. But I mean, we fixed the underlying issue with kubelet.
We also improved end-to-end test coverage for this.
Yeah, what we did not improve yet is basically extending KCP, that it looks at a lot more stuff when KCP makes decisions. I mean, now you can use machine readiness gates to add like whatever you want to add. But the built-in logic in KCP, we didn't extend that further, also because we have to be careful, like what is actually safe to look at, what can we actually rely on for like the whole community, and what only works in certain scenarios. I don't know. I mean, I cannot enforce like every control plane machine needs a kubeproxy if people are not even using kubeproxy, or instead it's Cilium or whatever. So that's somewhere there's an open issue for KCP specifically. We're just not sure when and how we should move forward there with KCP specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for bringing up the point. Stefan.
Yep, already. Just a heads up. I guess that mostly goes in like Fabrizio and Joel's direction because they will have the most fun with that. I just opened a PR. So basically what we're currently doing is, or mostly Joel and a few other contributors doing is like introducing an API linter and fixing a bunch of stuff. What I just opened a PR is essentially, I went through, so the linter I'm currently working on enabling is one that checks that all the fields should have a max length and max items, which basically is to set some upper boundaries, but also make sure that in the future we can add a little bit of cell with all the cell thinking, like, oh, this array has like 1 million elements. This PR specifically only enables the max items mark. Sorry, it enables the linter for the max items marker, which is basically a length limit on all arrays. So I went through our APIs, I think like maybe 50 or 60 markers or something, and set some upper bounds. They're entirely TBD. I definitely try to not set them too low. So, I mean, let's say I would have set like some of those markers too low. It could have happened that we cannot support clusters anymore that have more than 10,000 machines or something like that, right? That would be super bad just to not support stuff like that, only because I set like a marker on an API field. But I also set them relatively high, so maybe someone would have them a little bit lower. So I guess we need a bit of back and forth to end up with values that we're happy with. Yeah, so just a heads up. And yeah, I saw Joel already has some comments and has a comment here. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the number of machines one. Or number of nodes. Do we actually set or specify a maximum that we support?
No.
Okay. So just for some interesting background for people who maybe don't know quite how all this stuff works, but when you have an API, the maximum request size or maximum object size is 3 megabytes. And so if you were to calculate the worst case of like how many items could we have in a list, the way you normally do that is take the minimum size of the object and you can kind of work out, okay, between 3 megs, how many empty strings can we fit in? And you could work out that there's going to be about 1 million items in that list. If you fiddle that maths around a little bit, and we take the limit that you set for 100,000 items to be a node in that node list, a node name could be up to 253 characters, but 100,000 items in that list would mean that the average would have to be 31 characters. Which would then obviously cause problems. I don't actually think there's any real issues necessarily with the values you've chosen on any of these, but I did leave a few comments that might be a bit philosophical and or interesting to discuss.
Yeah, I probably picked the values too high.
The 100,000 node one is the one that kind of pulled me out particular, because if you made that 10,000, then every item in that list would guaranteed be able to have the 253 characters that it would need to be able to fit within that whole request thing, right? But that assumes that nothing else in the request is specified. So like I think it's all maybe a little bit nuanced, but yeah, have a read.
So what you're potentially saying is that maybe we actually already have limits today, depending on, I don't know, let's say we have, I mean, I personally not using machine pools, but let's just use machine pools, right? So we have some fields there where we have node refs. So node ref is, I guess, I don't know if there's like a provider ID in there or so. So what I could imagine is that just purely because we have like this node refs field in all of the machine pools and because of the max size, there might be already an upper limit of, okay, provider IDs are usually that long. We can only store 3 megabytes per object. So maybe a machine pool already today cannot support more than that number of nodes, right?
Yeah, by listing every node that exists within the cluster within an API, you are using a lot of space. And that might be something we want to revise in the future because it will put an artificial cap on the cluster size at some point. Now, that might be 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, sure. But it could be an issue for certain users in the future, yeah.
By the way, there's an open issue about that field that it potentially is like a scale problem or something. But I think people were not looking at it from like a 3 megabyte max size perspective, more like from maybe that's bad for performance if you have like a field that big. But
I'm pretty as a centrist.
Yeah, just sort of reverting the discussion, moving away from a technical detail, what can fit in an object, to asking to community, to the folks about the size of the cluster that they're running. So, because we made some scale experiments, both upstream and downstream. But yeah, there are so many ways to use Cluster API that I'm pretty sure that we don't cover all the scenario. So it would be great if folks that are running scale test or have specific scale requirement contribute in the discussion for this PR.
yeah, I'm always sort of hoping that maybe, hopefully, cluster API is not the limiting factor on workload cluster size. But I could see that we can easily become it if you want to manage a high number of classes with a huge number of machines in one management cluster. I think that can, I mean, one single huge cluster should not be the problem because I mean, 5,000 machines, 10,000, 20,000. Based on the scales we already ran, I'm relatively confident that you don't run into a problem like that. But if you want to manage like 100 clusters and each of these has like 10,000 machines or something, then we already ending up with like 1 million machine objects. And I have no clue what happens if you do that. So I do know that we have a lot of, I mean, in general, I think Copy is not doing a lot of stuff that should actually be a problem. So there is a lot of room of optimizations. And I think the biggest problems we have is that we never try to optimize for that sort of stuff beyond certain limits. So whenever people hit issues, it'll be definitely interesting to talk about it and see what we can improve. I do know that there are a bunch of things coming soonish in controller runtime over time that should make it a lot better. But we're not using them yet because we don't need them and because they're experimental. Yeah.
Look. So thanks for bringing it up and all that feedback. And if some users have special skill requirements, please speak up and provide feedback. Feedback is always good. With that, we can wrap the discussion topics. There are no provider updates, but there's a feature group update here. So Mike.
Yes, just a quick update that in about 30 minutes, 29 minutes, we'll be having a meeting of the Carpenter feature group. So that's it.
Thanks, Mike. And I just see Jakob writing a last-minute provider update for the IPAM provider, which released a 1.0.1 with a bug fix.
Yes, we've released a patch for the in-cluster IPAM provider that fixes a small bug, or well, not that small, but very annoying bug when deleting clusters, which caused IP addresses and claims to remain stuck after the cluster is deleted. Also affects anyone using the library that's part of the in-cluster provider to build their own IPAM providers.
Thanks for bringing it up. And with that, some last chance for last-minute topics. We're good in time today. Otherwise, we call it a day and give some time back. Once, twice, 3 times. Okay, thanks everyone, and see you hopefully next week.